the gist of what Ray Kurzweil said was that we will be able to incorporate technology in such a way that we don't have death anymore, that we will be able to live forever, that our biological bodies will merge with digital bodies, and we will ultimately be able to transcend death. And he said, but it's not so bad as it seems. We're not going to get bored, because we're also going to increase our mental capacity and find new worlds and new things to think about, new worlds to explore. That's it in a nutshell. The Immortality Hack. One of my favorite poems is Stephen Dunn's Different Hours. And there's a line in it which says, "The newspaper seems to be thinking my thoughts." Now, the idea for this sermon did not originate with me. It was Joan Caputo who suggested that it might be fruitful to explore how we deal with someone's death when we're connected with them through social media. But I took her suggestion in late June and put it on the sermon list for late July, for today. Lo and behold, the lead article in the New York Times Sunday Review for July 19th was titled, "My Digital Cemetery," about the question of whether we keep or delete social accounts for people after they have died. Has someone on the editorial board of the New York Times been subscribing to the Meeting House newsletter? The author of My Digital Cemetery is a journalist who's kept his list of contacts on a digital device since 1996, when he had them all on a Palm Pilot. Some of you may remember Palm Pilots. He has never pruned his contact list, which now has over 2,700 people, some of whom are deceased. The point of the article was that he doesn't remove people from his database when they die because he likes to be reminded of them. But actually this morning I'd like to expand the discussion beyond what the New York Times article dealt with. I'd like to discuss immortality itself. Immortality means the quality of not dying. It is equivalent in Christian thought to the phrase life everlasting. It is an ancient concept. Much of our earliest mythology envisions beings who do not die. It is the quality which separates the gods from the humans. In the Garden of Eden story, the punishment God imposes for Adam and Eve eating the forbidden fruit is that they and their descendants shall suffer death. This story is one way the ancient mind had of dealing with the disturbing fact that each of us dies. I'd like to distinguish here at the outset three types of immortality: social immortality, mental immortality, and physical immortality. Social immortality means that your existence never gets forgotten. You are remembered by those who knew you beyond your lifetime. Of course, the timeline for this cannot stretch out into all eternity, because unless you actually make history in some sense, the people who knew you during your lifetime will themselves eventually die off. So practically speaking, social immortality can't keep your memory alive for more than a generation or two after you die. Mental immortality would mean that your mind never shuts down, that they have found some way to keep it going after your body has died. But so far, all the minds we know are embedded in brains, which are part of bodies. We don't even know in theory what a disembodied mind, human mind, would look like, or would be like, though we're advancing in our ability to create artificial intelligence, mind-like capabilities which are created completely outside of an existing human being. The traditional religious concept of life everlasting, a continuation of existence in heaven or hell, might involve a kind of mental immortality, where one's distinct personhood and name is preserved without a physical existence. Though I should note that the Orthodox Christian creeds profess a belief in the resurrection of the body itself. Then there is physical immortality, where the medical processes of aging are stopped or reversed, and one simply continues in the body one has, but it doesn't break down. Well, let's start with social immortality and face the fact that having an entry in someone else's Rolodex or Palm Pilot or Twitter account is really different from actually being alive. If some genie in a fairy tale said to me, Edmund, at this point, I will give you two choices. You can be erased from the contact list and social media accounts of everyone who now has you and actually live for another 20 years, or you can die today and live on in all these contact lists and Facebook accounts. There wouldn't be much question which I would choose. I mean, which is more enjoyable, posting a picture of the great lobster dinner you're about to eat or eating it? Life is the greatest gift of all. Being here to breathe this air and walk in the sunshine, eat this food, and have these thoughts. If you die without closing down your email and Twitter and Facebook accounts, they will continue to exist after you are gone. And people who haven't heard of your passing may send messages to you there. A few weeks ago, Facebook generated a birthday reminder for an old friend of mine and Jacqueline's, whom I had known from multiple spheres. She was a folk dancer, a UU layperson, and a member of the Institute on Religion in an Age of Science, or IRAS. When Jacqueline sent her a birthday greeting, someone responded for her account that Betty had died suddenly in June. This is not the ideal way to learn of the death of a friend, but it is becoming increasingly common. If you go on Betty's Facebook page now, you will find reminders of her wit and her passions in posting that she made almost to the day she passed. There is a petition to sign for the Smithsonian Institution to get rid of a scientist who is a climate change denier and has been revealed to be in the pay of the oil industry. Yes, yes. There's a humorous picture of a dinosaur skeleton with plastic flamingos all over it, as if they're picking the bones clean. There's a photo of a vanity sink with a spiral design like a nautilus shell. If you know Betty, her vivacity and vibrant intelligence, these postings will remind you of her. You get a picture of the mind of the person that posted them. I agree with the writer of the New York Times article. I want to keep Betty's Facebook account so I can visit it and remind myself of the lovely, unique person she was. I use the word remind. Think about that word. It means to bring something back to mind, which has been out of our field of attention. When I look at Betty's Facebook postings, I'm bringing Betty's mind back to my mind. I'm not reviving Betty's mind. Social media, in this sense, perform a function in remembering the dead that is not all that much different from a gravestone in a cemetery, or a good memorial service, or an obituary in a newspaper, or one of those roadside shrines that pop up at the site of an auto accident for a few weeks. The dead drop out of our minds in the rush of our lives, and these devices remind them to us. In a sense, they have been dismembered, and these devices help us remember them. One of the hardest deaths I've experienced in my life was a friend named Billy I knew during my Charleston years, although he was originally from Boston. He and his girlfriend Patricia were close friends of me and my first wife, Lee. Billy taught me how to sail, and we went on glorious sailing trips together in the Caribbean. Billy had a weak heart, and in early 1989, he suddenly dropped dead of a heart attack in his late 40s. Though I was not a minister at that time, Patricia asked me to do the eulogy. It was one of my first experiences with preaching, which I found very satisfying. I could do something useful with my grief and loss by trying to put Billy into a few words for the benefit of all those who had known and loved him. I did not bring Billy back to life, but I brought him to mind. I've done this with dozens of people since then. My then wife Lee had a different experience. She was tending her garden a few days after Billy's death and looked up, and there he was. He only stayed for a few seconds and didn't say anything, but she knew it was him. How many of you have experienced the presence of a loved one after his or her physical death? One of the great mysteries of death is what happens to the personalities we have grown to know and love. We can say that they simply cease to be, but the mind does balk at that. Evolution has given our brains the ability to recognize individual faces, to hear individual voices, to remember individual smells and gestures and ways of standing. Our brains put all these sense impressions into the memory bank. It might as well be under a file called Betty or Billy. And that file is still there when the individual who occasioned it is gone. I can still remember my mother's gestures, her smell, and I bet you all can too. Not mine, yours. This is familiar ground. We know that we all die, and keeping alive memories of a person is a far cry from keeping the person alive. Betty will never again post to Facebook. Billy will never again teach me a new knot. The creative force, the agency, the acting person is gone, as my own self will be gone someday in the not too distant future. And we know that the social face we present to others is not the whole person. I have things going on in my body right now, which for very sound reasons I don't discuss socially outside the doctor's office. I have hopes and fears, fantasies and passions, which I may choose not to reveal to others. The social self, the self we present to others, is not the whole self. I conducted a memorial service recently for a man who went missing and is presumed dead in his late 40s after a lifetime grappling with drug addiction and bipolar disorder. In remembering him, his loved ones did not gloss over the hard stuff, but they emphasized his strength and courage, his curiosity and affability. There was a lot that was negative in his private life, but for very good reason we chose to remember him as positively as possible. Our Facebook pages and Twitter feeds, our email archives after we are gone, may similarly emphasize the face we choose to present to the world and downplay or completely hide the shadow side. Why do I bring this up? What am I trying to say? What I am trying to say is that we achieve a kind of social immortality on social media, but it's not basically different from what we achieved in your grandmother's day, in the world of printed matter, books, and photograph albums. It consists of aids to jog the memory of those who knew the person while alive and help them remember her after death. But there is a far different question lurking. Will information technology someday allow us a more robust immortality? Will there be a point in the future where we can upload to the cloud not only our conscious thoughts and composed words and photographs, but the neural processes that generate those thoughts, the emotional states, the sensory inputs, the integration of these all into a sense of self? Will we be able someday to upload our very consciousness into the cloud? I call this the Immortality Hack, and I'm not talking about taxi cabs in England. Hacking is a way to gain unauthorized access into computer systems, but it is also used more generally to mean a way of fixing a problem, often by unorthodox means. Ray Kurzweil thinks we will have a cure for aging, quote unquote, by 2045. Kurzweil described himself as a futurist, meaning a person who likes to think about the direction we're going. He has an impressive record as an inventor. One of his great discoveries was digital sampling. This organ we play would not be possible without the digital sampling that Ray Kurzweil discovered in the late 70s. He incorporated that generation of synthesizers in the 1980s that bear his name. Kurzweil, will not surprise you to know, was brought up at UU and is a grad of MIT. He is currently director of research at Google and is the author of many books on longevity, the brain, and human futures. Kurzweil represents a body of ideas called transhumanism, also sometimes called humanism plus. The idea is that biological humans will get so cozy with their cyber technology that they will begin to merge with it, and this will ultimately allow them to live forever. Now, there are plenty of people working on ways to have computers and other digital devices interface with neurological systems in the body. This is called brain-computer interface, or BCI. BCI in itself is not something to be feared. On the contrary, it can be very handy when the neurological system is damaged or impaired. Cochlear implants for hearing loss are one of the big success stories in this type of technology. But BCI does entail a vision of the contents of one's entire brain downloaded on a chip someday, Now, I would expect that this is a hugely complex problem, and I don't know if it's even possible in theory. But put that aside for a moment and ask, if it were possible, would it be something we would want? Kurzweil, in the clip I just showed, has been thinking through the objections. We might object that being a disembodied mind in a jar doesn't sound like a fun way to spend eternity. Kurzweil says we won't give up our bodies, we'll just find a way to keep them from breaking down. So he rejects what I have called mental immortality and opts for the physical. We might object that it's going to get very boring to live forever. He says we're going to increase the size of our cortex so that we can think bigger, faster, smarter, and master more knowledge, and we won't get bored. Maybe he's right. But I have preached before on why I think life everlasting is a bad idea, and achieving it through technology, instead of through winning the lottery at the Last Judgment, does not make it any better. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy my life and would not want it over tomorrow. But I am comforted by the thought that it will be over sometime in the not too distant future. Part of me looks forward to going through that door. I've said many times that a consciousness of death makes for a sharper, more focused attitude toward life. You can see this in people who know they have a terminal illness. The news makes their thoughts shift to what is really important in the time remaining. If you told me that my time in this mind could stretch out indefinitely, I would never get around to getting my book written. And I don't always find it pleasant to inhabit my mind, though most of the time I do. I know a lot of people who are very uncomfortable in their minds, who wrestle hourly with demonic urges and voices which can attack them in all the vulnerable places that only an insider knows. If your mental life is a daily hell, it does not do you any favors to say that it will last another 1,000 years. Would we upload our souls to a server in the cloud if technology could guarantee us that we'd be able to keep the lights on forever? I don't think I would. Death is a great downer, of course. I said a few weeks ago that the hardest part of my job here as a minister was losing the people I had come to love. But being with those people and their families as they pass through this mortal coil is also the most rewarding aspect of my calling. You never miss the water till the well runs dry. And the ache of losing someone you love at that final parting gate brings that love home to you in all its power. The process leading up to dying often involves physical pain and suffering. And death comes from the person dying as a welcome release from that suffering. The ache of missing them, of knowing that you will never have a mind-to-mind connection with them again, is the suffering that the survivors undergo. So far as we know, the dead do not miss the living. Death is a forgetting. And I say, so far as we know. And we must be humble about this. I've said many times one of my favorite slogans was on a lapel pin that said, militant agnostic, I don't know and you don't either. I think you just don't know what goes on beyond that veil. One of my favorite things to do in the Boston area is to visit Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge. It is beautiful. It was conceived as a city of the dead. I walk in it on a fall or spring day and drink in its beauty. And I think about how the beauty is wasted on its inhabitants. I'm reminded of the old shake note hymn, Idemea, which talks about the realm of the dead. A land of deepest shade, untouched by human thought, the dreary regions of the dead, where all things are forgot. Death is not a tragedy to the dead. It is not anything. Nothing is anything. Truth, beauty, honor, meaning itself are games played by the living. Meaning-making ceases with death. So I am comfortable that my brush with immortality will be social. I will keep the Facebook pages of friends who died to remind myself of how I love them in life, even if their circumstances of leaving were tragic. Love is what survives. And when my time comes, I will lay me down in the expectation that I am ready for a new adventure and that I might be remembered for one generation. But I want to move aside and let that new crop of humans inherit the earth. Amen.